All right, today we're going to be doing the unofficial trick tip to how to do board slide hurricane. And I think the reason why I keep calling these unofficial trick tips is because it's just kind of like the way I do it. And if I miss out some steps, like I'm sorry, like I might be like wrong or something. Kind of more of just kind of the little tricks and tips that I do to do these tricks. But yeah, today we're just going to be kind of discussing board slide hurricane and the little hacks to it. Maybe you guys will learn a new trick, but maybe you already know how to do this. I mean, this is probably my favorite board slide trick, or definitely my favorite board slide combination trick. And I feel like it's kind of the easiest. I feel like this trick is a little bit easier to learn than board slide feeble, just because board slide feeble kind of hangs behind you. Board slide hurricane is in front of you. So I just think it's a little bit easier to do. All right, so the first thing you want to do, like when you learn this trick, is find an unwaxed curb, or if you can't find a double-sided curb, maybe a parking block. An unwaxed one works just as good. Really what we're doing right now is just practicing board slide into hurricane. So essentially what we're just going to be practicing is this. Doesn't look too crazy, but I kind of like to treat it as like a two-step process. I kind of like to lean back and then turn. I feel like the more you practice just getting into the motion, standing still is a lot easier than when you're sliding. I feel like the secret to this trick, honestly, is having rails on your board, and especially having them further in. I can push back on my heels and it'll tilt. If you have your rails all the way to the edge, it's not going to give you that same type of tilt. It'll just kind of leave you in one pace. It actually might even be harder to tilt back if your rails are fully to the edge. Like I was saying, when you have rails, it's kind of like a two-step process. You're going to lean back and then turn into it. Before we go any further, I'm going to talk about if you don't have rails on your board. So hold on. If you don't have rails on your board, you can definitely see the leaning back and then turning in. That little two-step process, like I was saying, doesn't really apply to this if you don't have rails. When you're doing it without rails, it's going to be more of a one-step motion because you're going to be wanting to lean back and kind of shove all that weight right into the hurricane. Versus with the rails, it's more of that tilt back and then turn. This is kind of all one motion. And so your board's back on the balance beam right here. And as you can see now, like it's kind of more of a one motion. I can't lean back and then turn, like the lean back turn. I mean, I guess it kind of works, but it's definitely more single motion in there. Okay, now that we discussed rails and non-rails, let's talk about balancing this trick. We're switching up the angle over here. So I'm going to be using my board with rails, just so you can actually, you can probably see the better tilt from this angle too, with the rails on it. So just like I was saying, kind of that tilt and turn right there, kind of just sets you up nice. So anyways, we're going to just talk about like stalling and holding this trick. All right, so we're going to get back on this balance beam right here. Okay, so we're up here. The way I like to explain sitting in this trick is kind of like sitting on a toilet low-key, or just sitting down on the chair, squatting kind of weird, like this, like your butt's kind of sticking out, you're sticking kind of your body forward, your head's out, because all that pressure's on the heels. You're turning with your hips to essentially go stick into there. You're going to use your toe, heavy on that toe grip right there. But like, look at the stance I'm in right here, like I was saying, like my butt's kind of back there, my head's over my board, like my head is literally over my foot right here. It's kind of an uncomfortable position. It's kind of like I was saying, you're on the toilet, maybe you're going to throw up or something, but like it's very uncomfortable to stay. So I definitely suggest trying to stall and hold this before you start sliding the trick. Because when you start sliding this trick, your body's going to naturally, when you get in there, you're going to want to shoot back like that. But you have to really lean forward with this trick. This is for the regular foot skaters. We're going to lean back, tilt on the toe. You're going to hold that toe hard right there. But same thing, you're just in that awkward position where you're leaning back, you're tilting yourself forward, but your same thing, your head's got to be over your toes. So now that we talked about like stalling and holding it, we should talk about kind of coming out of the trick. So when I'm coming out of the trick, I honestly just treat it like a normal rock and roll on a quarter pipe and just turn out, kind of just like even a board slide. When you come out of a board slide early, you just use that big kick turn motion. And honestly, when you're doing it, don't be afraid to even hit into a board slide before you come out, especially when you're just learning this trick. It's not a big deal. And I feel like it'll kind of like help you get the confidence to turn it out earlier. But if you're using a parking block or you have a double-sided curb that does come to an end, it is a little bit easier to do that kick turn out. Then for regular, it would look like this. So, I mean, it's definitely easier to come off the end of it if you can. But if you do have to come out early, it's not that big of a deal. Okay, so I know we covered a lot of things. The last thing I'm going to cover before we actually start trying the trick is where you should get on your board slide. I mean, I guess that kind of sounded weird, but I guess the placement of your board makes difference getting into the trick. Let me show you what I mean. So when I get on my board slide, I try to focus on getting the rail or the curb, everything in the middle of my board. It's just a little bit easier to get that tilt into turn. If you're all the way on your corner and you try to turn like this, I find it a little bit harder. Your kingpin's going to grab a little bit more. And if you're all the way over here, well, it's a lot more to turn. So it's just going to be harder. So the easiest spot is honestly finding it in the middle right here. Just the easiest place to tilt and turn. So if you're a little scared, like don't approach it very fast. Honestly, maybe just give it enough speed just so you do a board slide, stop, and then you have time to tilt into your hurricane. So honestly, even like this, like a little bit, and then just like a little bit, just a little something essentially just to see what it feels like. But I think that's the best way to approach it. All right, so when you're using something kind of short like a parking block, you're gonna have to make that turn into that hurricane much quicker. So if you have like a nice long double-sided curb, that's pretty ideal. But the next best thing you can honestly use is like a flat bar. Especially if it's like a square flat bar, you're totally set. That's like the best thing to learn it on. Because when you do a hurricane on curbs, it will try to grab your truck a little bit. So if you do have like a longer square flat bar, or just honestly a longer flat bar to try it on, definitely a good option. Speaking of which, we have a circle bar over here. So you know what, we might go do a few on here. Big difference from doing it on a curb or a parking block to a rail is that the rail is going to slide much faster. So you're going to be wanting to obviously lean back, but you're going to want to be leaning forward as much as you can when you get into that hurricane. And if you don't, it's okay. You're just going to slip out. But trust me, after you start doing them a bunch, you'll definitely figure it out.
So here's an example of me not getting into the middle of my board. You could see I was kind of crooked, so I couldn't get into the hurricane correctly. During this attempt, you can see my back foot. I didn't push it down in front of me enough.
Felt like I just taught Dowdy this trick not too long ago. What do you feel like you want to add in? The things that you felt like were honorable mentions? You said
the heel. So like getting in the middle of the board is the biggest thing.
Middle of the board?
Also just using your heel to push it. Like you're using this and then you're like pushing it down in that.
Okay.
And then that's like what's jamming it. At least it seems like it. I think the other thing, I mean, those are the two biggest things. The third thing that I would add to that is just like making sure you land into the center of the board right away. Because it's hard to adjust from there. You kind of need to land in the center of the board. And the reason you need to land in the center of the board is that you have that leverage. I'm sure you already talked about that.
I did, but
like,
see,
hill,
it's the proof though. See, he learned.
Yeah, you put the heel over here, you're way in that pocket spot, and then if you shove it, it kind of connects to the rail. You know what I mean? So you're in the middle of the board. Or if you're here, you're gonna like there's no way to get onto it. So like it's almost you want to be a higher than you do lower. So I guess those are the three things I would take away.
You heard from the source.
See if I get lucky first try.
Okay. Okay.
Try one over rail.
Okay. So we just solidified too. Longer rail, longer curb definitely helps just because it gives you more time to turn into the trick.
And maybe speed.
Oh, and speed, he says. Speed too. Because I guess when you get into the actual hurricane, it slows you down a little bit.
Yeah. And you want to be able to sit in the back seat.
Nice. Easy money.
Here we go.
And that's Boardslide Hurricanes. Go do them like Dowdy.